You came home broke and jobless. Now you think you can save our hospital?
That hospital isn't bankrupt. Someone made it look that way.
Rachel, what did you find?
Rachel Morgan's old car died in the middle of the fall festival traffic. When she opened the trunk, 2 battered suitcases fell into the street, spilling clothes in front of dozens of people. An old classmate laughed. The girl who swore she would conquer Chicago finally crawled home with nothing. The crowd laughed with him. Nobody knew that inside one torn suitcase was something powerful enough to stop a multi-million-dollar deal. Rachel said nothing. Nearby, an older server was bumped and dropped a tray of food. While everyone stepped around her, Rachel packed her clothes away, then knelt to help. "You should worry about your own things first," the woman said. "My things are not hot, and nobody is going to slip on them." Then Rachel saw Grace Morgan approaching through the crowd. Her mother did not ask how much money she had left or how long she planned to stay. She simply hugged her. "Come home." The old house had peeling paint and a sagging gutter. A foreclosure notice sat beneath a pile of mail. Grace was still paying the loan taken out during Rachel's father's final months of treatment. "Why did you not tell me?" Grace placed a kettle on the stove. "You did not tell me you slept in your car for 3 nights before coming home." Rachel looked away. Grace placed the house key in her hand. "Coming home is not surrender, Rachel." A loudspeaker announced that Mayor Thomas Caldwell was about to speak in the town square. Grace looked at her daughter. "There is something happening with the hospital. You should hear it yourself." On stage, Caldwell stood beside a rendering of a luxury resort. Victor Lang, regional director for NorthStar Medical, stood beside him. "Millbrook Community Hospital is facing a $12.4 million deficit," Caldwell announced. "Without a solution, it will close in 30 days. NorthStar proposes buying the land for a wellness resort that will create 200 jobs." The crowd applauded. Millbrook had already lost its factory and many young families. The promise of jobs sounded like rescue. But Dr. Daniel Hayes and Dr. Helen Carter did not clap. The nearest major hospital was more than an hour away. Rachel studied the financial display. A sterilization equipment charge for $1,840,000 appeared in the second quarter. Then the exact same invoice code appeared again in the fourth quarter. Rachel moved closer. "Has this report been independently audited?" Caldwell recognized her. "Rachel Morgan, I heard Chicago did not work out the way you expected." Several people laughed. "I asked about the report, not my old job. A woman who could not keep her own career should not lecture this town about running a hospital." Caldwell did not know Rachel was certified in healthcare restructuring and had helped save 3 small hospitals from bankruptcy. Rachel did not mention it. Victor took the microphone. "The charge you noticed is simply an accounting allocation between reporting periods." "Then what is the original contract number?" Rachel asked. "And why do both charges use the same invoice code?" Victor turned toward the technician. "Show the employment forecast." The screen changed immediately. Rachel recognized that kind of avoidance from NorthStar files she had seen in Chicago. Then 10-year-old Ethan Hayes began wheezing near a smoke machine. Daniel was trapped on the other side of the crowd. Rachel ran to the medical station, grabbed an inhaler spacer, and knelt beside Ethan. "Look at me. Breathe out slowly. Good. Now use the medicine through this." When Daniel arrived, Rachel immediately stepped back. He received 1 dose through the spacer. He stayed conscious, his lips never turned blue, and his breathing is slowing. Daniel checked his son. Rachel handled it correctly and handed him over at the right time. "Thank you." Nobody was laughing anymore. Daniel faced the crowd. If this hospital closes, a child like Ethan could spend more than an hour in an ambulance. That can be long enough for a child to stop breathing. That afternoon, Rachel visited Millbrook Community Hospital. The halls were crowded with patients, even though NorthStar's reports claimed usage was falling. An MRI machine sat behind an out-of-service sign, while the financial records still listed maintenance charges. "Give me 7 days to review the books for free," Rachel told Helen. "I helped save 3 small hospitals from bankruptcy. A duplicated $1,840,000 charge does not look like a normal mistake." Helen hesitated. "NorthStar's keeping our credit line open so we can make payroll. If they pull it, hundreds of employees may not get paid. If the reports are false, waiting only makes the hospital weaker. I need proof before I risk their livelihoods." Helen refused, but as Rachel turned to leave, she lowered her voice. "There are invoices Victor ordered destroyed. I kept some of them. I cannot give them to you yet." It was not cooperation, but it was the first crack in the wall. Rachel later met privately with Caldwell and Victor. Delay the land sale for 7 days. Let an independent auditor compare the duplicate charge and contract records. If I am wrong, I will apologize publicly. Victor closed the folder. "You have no authority to access internal data. I am pointing to a specific discrepancy." Caldwell stood. "You are using public fear to rebuild your reputation. From now on, you may not contact hospital finance staff or access records without written permission." Victor smiled politely. "The whistleblower case in Chicago already cost you enough. You should know when to stop." Rachel froze. She had never publicly revealed the details of that case. Victor knew too much. That night, Rachel sat beside her damaged suitcase. Hidden inside the lining was a scratched red flash drive. The data had been preserved under her attorney's instructions, but without Millbrook records to compare against it, the files were not enough. Grace entered and placed an old brass key on the table. "Your father left a box of documents. I never had the courage to open it. This key does not fit anything in the house, because it is not for a door." Behind a tool shelf in the basement was a dusty metal box. Inside were her father's letters, hospital records, and the original land donation agreement from 1978. Rachel read the central condition twice. Her father and several founding families had donated the land only for community health care. If the property was ever transferred for private profit, control of the land would return to the Morgan Community Health Foundation. One sentence in her father's letter made Rachel's eyes burn. This land must never become property for the wealthy. She remembered the final phone call she had missed while he was dying. Rachel had been in Chicago trying to stop another hospital from being sold. The guilt had followed her all the way home. Now the letter felt like a second chance to protect what her father had left behind. Rachel examined the attached amendments. The Morgan family name was required on every future change. But on the final page, the confirming signature had been replaced by the name of someone outside the family. Rachel checked the filing date. The amendment had been made only weeks before NorthStar took control of the hospital. She tightened her grip on the page. Someone had not only manipulated the hospital's financial numbers, they had altered the legal records so the Morgan family could not stop the land from being sold. The question was no longer whether something illegal had happened. The question was who changed the signature and how long the scheme had been running. The next morning, Rachel went to the county records office. The original 1978 deed still stated that the Morgan Community Health Foundation had the right to seek protection of the land if the hospital was converted to private use. The amendment naming an outsider appeared only in the version NorthStar had submitted to the council. The foundation's attorney warned her, "This clause does not give you the hospital. It only gives you standing to ask a court to block improper private use of the land. We still have to prove the deal primarily serves private interests. Then we will prove it." Helen allowed Rachel to review selected invoices under supervision. Rachel found maintenance charges for an MRI machine that had been broken for 2 years, salaries for specialists with no personnel records, and 2 vendors using the same mailing address. One invoice carried a logo Rachel remembered from NorthStar files in Chicago, where money had been routed through several companies before disappearing. Maria Lopez, an accounts payable employee, quickly hid a small notebook when Victor appeared. Later, she quietly placed it beside Rachel and walked away. Inside were timestamps showing invoices being altered after payment. But when Rachel asked if Maria was willing to testify, the woman went pale. "I have 6 years left before retirement. My family cannot survive a lawsuit." Rachel handed the notebook back. "I will not use this until you are protected. I will arrange an independent attorney. After that, the decision is still yours." Rachel refused to save the hospital by sacrificing a frightened employee. By noon, the local newspaper published a story claiming Rachel wanted to seize the hospital. It cited NorthStar records saying she had been fired for financial misconduct, while ignoring that she had been a whistleblower and had never been charged with a crime. At a diner, a man her father had once helped confronted her. "You want to use your family foundation to take the land, do you not?" "I am trying to stop it from being sold." "How do we know?" "You hid the reason you were fired." Rachel left without ordering. Grace was waiting outside with the same newspaper. "For a moment, even I wondered if they were telling the truth," she admitted. "You never told me anything." Rachel looked down. "I reported falsified financial records. They fired me, sued me, and made other hospitals afraid to hire me. I hid it because I was ashamed, and because I did not make it home before Dad died." Grace took her hand. "I was hurt that you were not there, but I never thought you failed because you told the truth." That afternoon, Daniel came to the Morgan house. He offered to stand beside Rachel at the council meeting and publicly release hospital reports NorthStar had forced staff to withdraw. He placed 3 signed reports on the table. One warned that emergency oxygen reserves were below the required minimum. Across the top was an instruction from the regional office ordering the warning withdrawn. Rachel understood what Daniel was risking. "You could lose your job. Ethan needs your insurance." "That is my decision," Daniel replied. "Do not protect people by removing their right to choose whether they stand with you." Rachel realized she had become so used to carrying everything alone that she had started making choices for people who wanted to help. Before the council meeting, she met Caldwell outside City Hall and handed him a certified copy of the land deed. "You still have time. Disclose every conflict of interest, delay the vote, and request an independent audit. You can say the legal issues need review. Nobody is asking you to admit wrongdoing before the facts are complete." Caldwell glanced at the county seal. "You are threatening 200 jobs with an old document." That evening, he moved the vote forward by 2 days and publicly called Rachel the woman trying to destroy Millbrook's last chance. Victor later met her in the hospital parking lot, carrying a thick agreement. "NorthStar will pay enough to restore your apartment, cover Grace's mortgage, and clear your employment record. In exchange, you hand over the flash drive, sign a confidentiality agreement, and abandon the foundation's claim." The amount was enough to save her mother's home. Rachel closed the folder and handed it back. "You can buy the silence of someone afraid of losing everything, but I have already lost almost everything." Less than an hour later, a tanker truck slid off the highway in heavy rain and caused a chain reaction crash involving a school bus. Dozens were injured. Ethan had been riding in a vehicle behind the crash and suffered a severe asthma attack from the smoke. Millbrook Hospital activated mass casualty procedures. Daniel and Helen treated patients while Rachel organized intake, counted available beds, contacted the blood bank, and requested support from neighboring hospitals. The waiting area quickly overflowed. Rachel moved minor cases into physical therapy, converted outpatient rooms into observation space, and required empty beds to be updated every 5 minutes. She did not wear a medical coat and gave no clinical orders. Her job was to make sure doctors had the right patients, equipment, and resources at the right moment. "How many backup oxygen tanks do we have?" she asked. A nurse checked the storage area and returned in panic. "The system says 20. There are none." Rachel recognized the contract code. The hospital had paid in full for those tanks through one of the shell companies listed in the suspicious invoices. Rachel called the fire department and requested oxygen from the disaster response reserve, then asked the county hospital for additional supplies. The tanks arrived only minutes before the hospital's remaining oxygen dropped to a dangerous level. Daniel stabilized Ethan, then treated a student with chest trauma. Nobody was thinking about the land sale anymore. They were trying to keep people alive. Near dawn, Ethan was stable, and most victims had been treated. Daniel stepped into the hallway with blood on his gown. If this hospital had already closed, he told the waiting families, some people here would not have survived the trip to the next facility. Maria looked at the empty oxygen storage area and understood that the false invoices were not only stealing money, they could kill patients by replacing real equipment with numbers on paper. She found Rachel and handed her notebook to an attorney from a whistleblower protection organization who had joined by video call. "I will testify," Maria said, "but I want every file copied and preserved correctly." Her voice was still shaking. Rachel did not tell her to be brave. She simply stayed beside her while the attorney explained every protection available. "We will document the transfer and create verification codes," the attorney said. "You will also have independent legal representation." Maria signed the statement. System logs showed that an administrator account had repeatedly re-entered invoices late at night. Each login verification code had been sent to a phone number assigned to Victor's office. Helen also turned over emails in which Victor had ordered her to destroy records. For the first time, Rachel's red flash drive had independent Millbrook data to compare against the Chicago files. The fraud pattern was the same. NorthStar had been using the same method in both places. But just as the auditors began securing copies, Rachel's phone rang. The council would vote on the land sale at 9 the next morning before the audit report could be completed. Rachel looked at the clock. Less than 12 hours remained. She now had a red flash drive, a witness who had finally stepped through her fear, and a buried clause in a decades-old land agreement. And before sunrise, all three would have to stand against the full power of NorthStar. At 8:45, City Hall was packed with residents and hospital employees. Rachel entered with the red flash drive in her pocket, while Maria walked beside her attorney. People who had once laughed at Rachel now watched her with a mixture of doubt and hope. Caldwell opened the meeting with images of the proposed resort and the promise of 200 jobs. "This is Millbrook's last chance to save its economy," he said. "We cannot let someone who failed in Chicago destroy our town's future." Victor stood and placed Rachel's termination records before the council. Miss Morgan lost her job because of financial problems. Her flash drive could have been altered after she returned. We should not delay a legal transaction because of accusations from someone trying to rebuild her reputation. Rachel stepped to the microphone. "I lost my job, my savings, and my apartment. I also lost the chance to be with my father during his final days. I do not deny any of that, but I refuse to lose one more thing: my willingness to speak when false numbers are threatening people's lives." The foundation attorney presented the verified land deed and confirmed Rachel as the last legal representative of the Morgan Community Health Foundation. Regulatory records also showed that Rachel had been a NorthStar whistleblower, not someone charged with a crime. Her professional history confirmed that she had helped 3 small hospitals avoid bankruptcy. Murmurs spread through the room. Rachel stopped the applause before it could grow. "Representing the foundation does not mean I own this hospital. It only gives me the right to ask a court to protect the community purpose of this land. This hospital does not belong to one family. It belongs to the people who need to walk through its emergency doors." The auditor presented the findings. $4.6 million in duplicate invoices, $3.1 million transferred to shell companies, $2.2 million charged for equipment that did not exist, and additional losses hidden as management fees and non-existent employees. Nearly the entire reported deficit had been created on paper. Victor interrupted. "Those numbers came from her flash drive." "Not only from the flash drive," the auditor replied. "The metadata matches server records, bank statements, and vendor backups. Verification codes prove these files existed before Miss Morgan returned to Millbrook." The $1,840,000 equipment charge was the same invoice entered twice. A broken magnetic resonance imaging machine was still being billed for maintenance. 20 oxygen tanks had been paid for, but never delivered. Maria stepped forward. Her hands shook, but her voice remained clear. I was ordered to enter invoices again after they had already been paid, using codes supplied by the regional office. I kept a notebook because I was afraid the accounts payable staff would eventually be blamed. Her attorney submitted the notebook and system logs. Verification codes used during the altered entries had been sent to a phone assigned to Victor's office. Helen then provided emails in which Victor ordered her to destroy invoices. I trusted NorthStar's reports for too long, she told the hospital staff. I take responsibility for not questioning them sooner. Daniel presented the report on the empty oxygen storage room and the previous night's accident. We saved Ethan and many other patients because oxygen from the fire department arrived in time. A few more minutes could have changed the outcome. This is no longer an accounting dispute. This fraud directly endangered lives. Two council members who had supported the land sale leaned toward each other and began whispering. But Rachel was not finished. The records showed that one shell company was controlled by an associate of Victor. The company selected to build the resort belonged to Caldwell's brother-in-law. Both used the same intermediary address. Rachel turned toward the mayor. You still have one final chance. Disclose the conflict of interest and request a delay yourself. Caldwell tightened his grip on his pen. My brother-in-law operates a legitimate company. Everything else is coincidence. The foundation attorney projected an email onto the screen. In it, Caldwell's brother-in-law promised him preferred investment rights after the resort was approved. The arrangement had never been disclosed in his conflict of interest filings. The doors opened. A court representative entered carrying a temporary order, blocking the transfer of the land while the disputed amendment and the true purpose of the transaction were reviewed. The hospital board immediately suspended NorthStar's contract, froze Victor's financial authority, and referred the records to the state attorney general. This is an ambush, Victor said. No, Rachel replied. You were warned twice, and you still have the right to an attorney and to challenge the evidence during the investigation. Victor had not been convicted, and Caldwell had not been arrested, but the council postponed the sale indefinitely and required Caldwell to withdraw from every decision involving the project. Two members changed their votes after hearing Maria's testimony. The audit later confirmed that Millbrook Community Hospital could remain open if it canceled the fraudulent contracts, renegotiated its debt, and restored rural health care grants. The closure plan was withdrawn. Millbrook residents stopped leaving the hospital's future entirely in the hands of corporate promises and council decisions. They created a community oversight group, attended public budget meetings, and organized fundraising for the emergency department. People who had once applauded the resort proposal now brought small donations to the hospital. Rachel reminded them that keeping the building open was only the first step. The hospital survives only if the entire town accepts responsibility for protecting it. NorthStar removed Victor from his position. After a full legal process, he was convicted of contract fraud and embezzlement and ordered to repay money according to the court's judgment. Caldwell was investigated for undisclosed conflicts of interest. He resigned and later faced charges through the proper legal process. When the hospital board offered to make Rachel the hospital's owner, she refused. I did not fight to replace one group of people in control with my own name. Instead, she accepted a temporary position as restructuring director under the supervision of doctors, nurses, patients, and community representatives. Major contracts became public. An independent whistleblower system was created. Employees who had done nothing wrong kept their jobs and pensions. The hospital established a fund for uninsured patients and launched a childhood asthma program. Helen became an advisor. Maria kept her job and pension and joined the Transparency Committee. Grace volunteered with the fund for patients who could not afford care. Rachel used her income and the settlement from her whistleblower case to begin paying down her mother's mortgage. 6 months later, the emergency department reopened after renovations, but the building still carried the name Millbrook Community Hospital. At the reopening ceremony, Ethan gave Rachel a model hospital he had built himself. Across the roof were the words, "A place where nobody is left behind because they cannot pay." Ethan's asthma was now better controlled through the hospital's new program. He placed the model in Rachel's hands and told her that someday he wanted to build devices that would help children breathe more easily. Daniel stood behind his son, his expression carrying a gratitude that did not need words. Grace placed her husband's old letter inside the hospital's historical display. Rachel looked at her father's handwriting and finally understood that she had not returned to Millbrook to live beneath the shadow of failure. She had returned to finish what he had started. When the ceremony ended, Daniel stood beside her near the emergency entrance. "Would you like to get coffee after your shift?" Rachel looked at him and smiled. "Yes, but choose somewhere without a council meeting." It was not a promise of a rushed romance. It was simply an open door between two people who had learned to respect each other's right to choose. Rachel had returned to Millbrook with almost nothing left, but because she no longer had a reputation or fortune to protect, she had become free enough to protect what the entire town could not afford to lose. Dignity is not determined by where a person falls. It is revealed by what they choose to protect when they stand again.